So today I'm going to talk about KnockoutJS. I chose KnockoutJS because we use it in V5 for a lot of the user interaction stuff, but it's also very handy for you guys. You can use it in your own project, so I thought I'd give you the best of both worlds. So about me, I'm level 1, 2 certified, MVP from last year, well this year, created a few packages. You might have heard of them: Desktop Media Uploader, Universal Media Picker, and a few more. And as of 3 months ago, I work for Umbraco HQ as well. So those are my details. If you ever need to get hold of me, ask me any questions. But let's kind of start the show. So what is KnockoutJS? So this is taken from their website. KnockoutJS is a JavaScript library that helps you to create rich, responsive display and edit user interfaces with a clean underlying data model. Done! Any questions? So let's kind of dig into what that all means then. So I guess one of the first questions I always get asked when I talk about KnockoutJS to anybody, but I already use jQuery, so why would I use KnockoutJS? So to that I just say, well, that's fine. I use both. KnockoutJS works on top of jQuery and pretty much any other library, and essentially it boils down to the fact that they're solving completely different problems. So what's the difference? Well, jQuery simplifies DOM interactions, so it makes it really easy to get hold of the DOM and do things at that low level. It takes manual wiring, so for anything that happens you need to tell jQuery that you want to register for an event or you want to be notified of anything. But essentially it's all very low level stuff. You're dealing directly with the DOM. KnockoutJS, on the other hand, it simplifies UI interactions. So it's a very broad term, but that's because it's that's the thing it's trying to solve. It's the interaction with the user interface and making it much more responsive. A lot of it is kind of wired automatically, so you might kind of question what that is, but we'll kind of get into what all the wiring is in a moment. But essentially it's much higher level than jQuery is. So how does it work? So here's a really simple example. So this is a bit of JavaScript. We're essentially creating an object and we've got two properties on there. One is available colors, which is just an array with a couple of colors in, and then we've got a selected color, which has got a value of something called KO.observable, which, what the hell is an observable? Which we'll kind of get onto in a minute, but that's essentially what's going to wire everything together. So if we just understand that that's just a variable at the moment, we can talk about observables in a moment. So step 2, we've declared our model, and now we need to declare our bindings. So our bindings tell the UI how to respond to changes to our model. So in this instance, we've got a header that's just what is your favourite colour, so we're going to use the array of colours to allow people to choose one of those items. So we define the select list, and then we've got these attributes called data bind. So in here we've got the first one says options, and that is told to use available colours. So that's essentially binding the options list of the drop down to be the available colours array. And then we've got value is put into the selected colour, which I guess if we jump back, so available colours will become the options, and we've got this selected colour thing, which when you change the drop down it's going to get stored into the selected colour. And then we've also got one that's options caption, which allows you to put like a default value in, so choose a value. And then below that we're defining a p tag. It's got a data bind attribute again. This time it's visible, and that's on the selected colour attribute. We'll get into all the different kind of binding things at the moment, in a moment, but essentially what we then do is just render out which colours I've chosen. So step 3, you need to wire it all together. So at the moment we define a model, we've defined our bindings. Now we just need to tell KnockoutJS wire the two together, please. So all we need to do is end with ko.apply bindings, passing in the view model. Ta-da! Done! Yeah, it's great. So I had a feeling you wouldn't believe me, so I just thought I'd show you the example. So this is everything we just saw in the three slides. So we've got a title, we've got a drop-down list. You can see that the drop-down list has got the values of everything that was in the array. And when we choose a value, the UI automatically updates, renders out the selected value. So I didn't use jQuery to say register an event on the drop-down list, on change, get the value, tell that p tag to make itself visible, and I didn't then inject the colour into there. I just decorated my HTML with a few attributes, and it kind of took care of everything else. I'll go back to the slides. So that is a really simple example. So what the hell just happened? So here we've got a kind of representation of the model on the left-hand side and the HTML on the right-hand side. So number one, page binds to the model. So when we call the ko.apply bindings, everything gets wired up. Number two, the drop-down list is populated, so its options were pre-filled to be the colour options. Number three, you select a value, and it basically just the value binding tells it to update the value property on the model. By updating the value property on the model, it automatically then rebinds everything else that's bound to that variable, and in this case it renders the you selected such and such colour. So that's an awful lot for very little. So let's kind of delve into what more of the kind of terminology then, because that's essentially everything that happened. It was all bound together, it all kind of worked itself out, all via these little attributes decorated around. So the first thing is observables. So what is an observable? An observable is essentially a wrapper around a variable which makes it bindable and allows other things to be notified when it changes. So if you make any change to any kind of observable, anything that's listening to it, whether that's the data attribute bindings or you can actually subscribe to them.
Is the handheld mic around somewhere?
I don't know. Yeah, so anything that's listening for events will automatically get told when anything changes. So we've got a few, there's kind of three options. We've got KO observable. This is just a bog standard variable. So here we can have like a string or any simple value types. But then we've got a special case which is observable arrays. So we can actually listen for changes in an array in terms of whether it gets sliced, pushed, shift, any kind of array actions. If an array gets changed, you can be told that that array has changed. And then we've also got a third option, which is a KO dependent observable. So this allows you to kind of build up other outputs based upon the other variables. So in this instance, we kind of put together a full name based upon two first name and last name attributes. But it basically allows us to kind of build a dynamic value and also be notified. If any of the two things change, then that will also trigger and you'll be told that the compound has been updated. So, bindings. So, all the little attributes that run the HTML, these are all the things you can use. So we've got a few that are kind of appearance based. So we've got things like text, which will set the text of a HTML element. You've got visible, which will make it visible or invisible, depending on a Boolean expression essentially. And we've got CSS. Attribute allows you to kind of define an attribute. The CSS one is a CSS class, so you can apply or remove the class. Style lets you apply styles individually, and HTML lets you set the HTML value of a tag. So they're all the kind of appearance related ones. And then we've got a lot of kind of form fields, which is more kind of your interaction bindings. So I think a lot of them are kind of self-explanatory. So we've got check for checkboxes and radio buttons. We've got click. We've got disable, enable, so they can disable, enable fields. Selected options, which work specifically with arrays, so of kind of radio button lists, so you can get a selected list of options if you've got more than one. Options we saw on the drop down pre-populated a select list, and then we've got value can bind to a value of an input. Submit is obviously submit, and event allows you to essentially bind to any other event. So any event that any kind of element fires, so you can bind to key ups, key downs, mouse clicks, mouse overs. You can register to be notified when that happens and have something happen within your model. My phone went to sleep. So there's also a really handy thing, which is templating. So far we've kind of covered, I guess the first two slide parts to this were the things that you'll use quite a lot. So that was all the observables, so you just need to define a certain type of observable value. And then the data bindings are the things that take care of all the wiring. But there's a really handy feature on top as well, which is templating. So we can basically define an observable, and then we can, in our HTML, do another data bind attribute, and in this one we use a template binding, and we give it the name of a template. Now currently in KnockoutJS, templates are script tags in your HTML with an ID and the type text HTML. And then anything inside the script tag will become a template. You can also kind of get access to the variables that are being pushed in. But a template essentially allows you to kind of, when a value changes, you can have a binding. So this binding could get changed, and fire that template and basically render out a complete UI for every time something changes. It's really useful for things like lists, so you can observe for push or pull from shift from an array, and have kind of template rows for each item in the array. If something gets added to the array, automatically reuses the template, builds it up underneath, and just pushes the HTML in there. I've got a really good example of that in a moment. But just for now, you have got templating as well, so you can do really fancy stuff. So, okay, I'll show my example now. So, in this example, I've just got quite a really simple to-do list. So this is kind of, this is quite a well-known example, but you can basically type, add anything in the checkbox, check items, clear unchecked items, and remove items from the to-do list. So what I'll do is kind of just jump into the code for that. See if I can use your... I haven't got a plus key. No.
Windows plus.
Yeah, I'm on a Mac keyboard.
Oh, Command plus.
I haven't got a plus key. Anyway.
Well, you can use this to magnify it.
Can you increase size in Dreamweaver?
I don't know. I haven't seen Dreamweaver.
We'll open with Visual Studio because I can change the size. So in this example, so have you seen the to-do list? So I'll just run you through the view model, how that's set up, the bindings that are all applied, and this uses some templates as well. So it's a really good example of all the three things we just kind of talked about. So Yay! So here I'm just kind of including, I'm actually using some jQuery, so I've got the jQuery library, so as I say, they kind of work really well together. It's not one or the other. They solve different problems, so they're both very useful, and they can be combined together. It can also work with jQuery templating for the templating side of things, which I'm going to use. So I'll include the jQuery templating, and then just include the KnockoutJS library. So for my to-do list, I'm actually going to create. This is essentially just creating similar to a class in C#. I just create a to-do object. So that allows me to, every time you hit enter, create one of these objects and just stick it in the array. This is just a standard blueprint for a to-do. So each to-do has got a name, it's got a boolean of isDone, and it's also got a remove method. So that's another kind of really useful thing. You can actually put methods into your view models and bind events to fire those methods. And the really, really useful thing about that is that method gets fired in the context of your view model. So I can kind of show you here really quickly that that's that's how easy it is to kind of remove a to-do from a list. You just tell the to-dos list, remove myself, and everything else will update. But we'll kind of get to more of that in a moment. But that's the blueprint of a to-do. And then I just do some JavaScript to set up my view model. So I've got a list of to-dos. So this is an observable array, because I want to get notified when a new to-do gets pushed in or one gets completed and removed. We have a current field, which allows us to keep track of what people are typing in into the input field to create a new one. And then we've got a method for adding a to-do. We've also got a method for removing all the completed ones, which is that little button in the right hand side. On top of that, we've created a couple of dependent observables. So we've got one complete list of all the to-do lists, but we create a couple of dependent observables so that we can easily find how many have we got remaining, what are the ones remaining, and which are the ones that are completed. So we've just created a dependent observable. We've actually used a little utility that comes with KnockoutJS. There's a few, so you can find all the documentation for those online. But this essentially just says, go through all the to-dos and filter by, is it done? So it just checks whether it's done or not done in the other one. But those are just then really useful because we can easily get access to all the remaining, all the completed, and they also both update whenever the to-dos list updates. And so that's essentially the model. We trigger at the end ko.apply bindings view model. So we just tell it to apply all the bindings. We'll get down to the HTML bindings just below. And then for some reason in this example I needed a bit of hack to stop the key down and press enter, posting back. I'm sure I've seen loads of examples with it, but for some reason in mine it wasn't. I don't know whether it's Chrome or whatever. But all that is I've just done a jQuery key down to block enter key so that I can track it, capture it in KnockoutJS. But here we've got, so next I'm going to define my template. So as I say, you can use templates to render out a reusable piece of HTML. So this is a to-do list, a to-do item. So I guess in the HTML, this is one of these rows. So each time you enter a to-do list, the template is going to define what this is. So if we go back, so a to-do item or task template here is we've just got a div class around it. We data define the CSS and we just add a class of isDone if the done value is should be isDone. Oh no, that's right. Sorry, we apply a done CSS class if the isDone property on the individual to-do is marked as done. Then below that we just got a checkbox, which is its checked value is bound to the isDone. So that will automatically do the wiring every time you change the value of the checkbox. It will automatically tell the isDone value in the model to update, which will automatically update the CSS class. And then We've got one which is text, binds the name, so we don't, again, that's pull the name in so you can see what the to-do is. And then we bind a click event to fire the remove event. So, as I kind of showed really quickly at the beginning, so each item will bind to that model. Each one's got a name, which is bindable. It's got an is done, which is bindable, which binds to the checkbox. And it's also got a remove method, which we bind to the click event. So when you click, calls the remove event, tells the parent to remove itself from the to-do list, all the UI updates. So, and then the only last bit is we just render the rest out. So we've got a to-do title, we've got an input field, which takes the current value. So, see, you don't even need Nextdoor. I've got some HTML5 in here. Placeholder. So I've got a data bind. I bind value to the current, so that's how we're tracking what people have typed into the text box. And then I bind to the key up, so that whenever somebody, if we just jump back to the key up command on the view model, which is there. So every time somebody enters a key on the text box, this thing's going to check whether it was an enter key. If it is an enter key and you've got a value, it creates a new to-do and simply pushes it into the array and then clears the text box. It clears the text box by just clearing value. So you're only ever dealing with the values. You never deal directly with an element because things are just bound to those values. You just need to make sure your values are observable and then you just deal with values. Really simple. So you type a value in, click enter, that fires the add event, which checks whether it was an enter key, and then creates a new to-do, pushes it into the array. The array notifies everything, says, oh, I've got a new to-do. And then that's bound to the last bit. So we've got a div here, which says bind on the template, named class template, which was the script block we just saw above. And in this case, we're doing it for each to-do. So for each of the to-dos in the to-do list, render that template. So the template goes into the array, that div's notified, and re-renders the list. And then we've just got a few kind of helper things at the bottom. So we show how many items are complete. So here you can actually do Boolean statements within your bindings. So we can bind the visible to completed is a list of completed items. So we can get a completed list, check for length is greater than 0. And on the, so that's the button on the right hand side, it's using float. So it will only show the clear completed tasks if there are some completed tasks. So you're using the Boolean check there just to make sure there's something in that array. And that array is actually a dependent object. So, and then we've got the click, which is hooked up to the remove completed. So remove completed essentially just tells the to-do list, remove all the values, and again, all the UI just updates itself. And then the last one is just how many items have you got left, which is there. So that's bound to the remaining array, it just gets the length, and it's the text value. So that the text value of that span will be the number of remaining items. So if we just see that again, so there, that's that little bit. So it's telling you how many items you've got left. So every time I check an item, everything rebound, everything's told that there's an update, everything updates. This now shows because you've got some completed checks. You can click that button and it'll remove them. So I think that would be really complex to do in jQuery. But in here, you just deal with a model, you update the model, everything binds and everything's told to update and it does it itself.
So if you were to duplicate that div just a couple more times, would it automatically just appear?
Yep.
Sorry to bother you.
That's alright. So each one of those divs is told to bind the same. So we've duplicated it. Each one individually is told to bind to the same array. They're all notified. I didn't do anything else, I just duplicated the HTML. So it just finds all the binding statements and hooks everything up. It's really powerful. So is there any kind of questions on that so far? Or does everybody think that's amazing? Like I do.
Matt,
Yeah?
how did you choose KnockoutJS?
How did I choose KnockoutJS?
Were there any other ones to use for being backbone?
The only other one that's very similar is Backbone.js. Backbone.js. They're very similar.
We started using it because Niels found it and emailed us and said this is cool, and we thought, actually, yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And that was literally what went into it, because it was so much better than what the approach we were already taking. In fact, there is, I think, a document type editor that's still not using Knockout, because we'd already built that by the time Niels found Knockout. But we'll get that converted over.
Yeah.
But we didn't do like an appraisal between the other.
No, we just started using it, and it was just literally you get it and it works, and you're like, we'll use it. there was no reason to try and look for another one, because it just did everything we wanted it to do. It was fantastic. So.
Just like performance-wise, and is there anything you need to look out for so you don't get caught in?
I can't say we've done anything really performant on it, like really massive, because all I use, we just do everything in really small modules, so like permissions dialog, it's just that we just deal with permissions. You can actually the permissions grid is actually a jQuery plugin which uses KnockoutJS internally, so each grid is a jQuery plugin using KnockoutJS inside it. So it's actually duplicated a few times, because if you remember on the permissions grid, in fact I'll show you, because I was going to move on to next, just showing a few examples really of how we've done it in V5.
Can you wear this instead?
Yeah.
Yes, that one.
Interlude. So yeah, it was just so I can show you a couple of examples of how we've used it in V5. But is there any more questions while I kind of load up Visual Studio? There's one over there.
How easy is it to do like nested templates? So you've got like
really easy. You just create another template and you do the same binding inside the first template. So I actually do that in the permissions, because I think I do. Well, I do it, I used to, because now I use the jQuery plugin. But originally I was looping through one thing, create if I show you the UI, I'll show you how I did do it, but we have changed it slightly. I just remembered I'm on yesterday's build, but we'll see. It might work. Well, permissions will work. If you see a YSOD, don't be alarmed. It's intentional. Oops. It's not good. I'll give it another moment. Hey! So, for each permission grid, so we can show the permission grid on each node. Which will be the right place to show it. So, homepage, permissions. So, So this permission grid uses KnockoutJS. I did it slightly different. So in answer to your question, the way it used to work is you'd got a list of user groups in that drop-down list. So I made that a bindable array, an observable array, and then this is basically duplicated, like for every group that's in the drop-down. It's just told to hide the other ones until you select it in the drop-down list. So again, that's bound. That's all bound. Was all bound using KnockoutJS, and then so each one of these was a template, which is just a table, and then internally each item is also a template. So with that, you can just how you've got the. It's probably closed that, isn't it? So it'll be a bit small because I'm in Dreamweaver here, but how you've got that template, you can just create another template and reuse the same template kind of bindings here inside your other template, so you can just keep nesting and you can just keep building on models in models, all as long as they're all observable. It's fine, all works. So here we have got the permissions grid. So as I say, this is all working off of KnockoutJS, and as I say, each one of these is just a table. Each permission, so dynamically finds all the permissions in the system and just builds a grid for each permission that it can find. So each row has got an allow deny check, and all of that is just based on the model. So all of the clicking on these just binds all the values, and it's really easy. You can push the model as a JSON object, and all the values are already set, and you just push them you can push them to the server, and they've all been handled. You're just changing all these things. It updates your model. You just push your model when you're done. It's really powerful for JSON related stuff as well. And I think one of the things when we internally realised just how easy it is I built all of this originally with a few things off, and I showed it Alex, and Alex says, "That's great, but what if it just did?" And I was like 2 minutes later, I came back and he went, "Oh, like this." So it's just things like when you change a permission, it shows you, grays out what you did have, and it also puts an alert next to it. By using bindings, it was just really easy to find out when that stuff happens. And so I built that, showed Alex, said, "That's great, but could you just check all of the items?" So again, we just applied a binding we just created an A, put a binding on the click. When you click it, it goes through all the models and just tells them, set your value to allowed. All the UI automatically updates. And we were just like, that'd have been a right pain in jQuery. We'd have had to gone through each element, find the checkboxes, and tell them all to be checked. Whereas here, we just go through the model. We know where the model is, we just go through it, change everything to checked, and it's all done. So that for us internally was, wow. We obviously told Niels it took way longer than that, but yeah, for us it was just it's one of those moments where you just realise this is really powerful. I'm actually quite on time. I think so. I'll just jump back to my slides, because I have got a question section anyway. So, nope, still don't get it. Any questions? So, there were a few more questions, I think. Does anybody else have any questions? In the blue? Yeah.
Any reason why you're calling change events on that?
Oh, yeah. It was just another hack, because... yeah, I just did... I had that in the add statement, which the KnockoutJS bindings on a text box fires on the change, which fires on the blur. But I'm wanting to detect the enter key, so all I've done is said, and it's really small, but I just tell the target to use a bit of jQuery to tell the target to trigger its change handler. So every time you hit a key press, I'm forcing it to change.
Could you not just told it to update on keys?
Yeah. Yeah, I could. But I didn't. Smart ass. Anybody else? Yeah.
What's the fallback?
What's the fallback? It's JavaScript, so. Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's 2011. Use JavaScript. Yeah.
Some of the attributes that you've got to use as they're not standard HTML. If you run that through a validator, I guess that would probably just.
Yeah, there is. So, he was saying all the data bind attributes on HTML elements wouldn't pass on a validator. They will, or they won't.
I think data dash.
Yeah, I think because it's using data dash, I'm pretty sure data is.
You'll pass HTML validation.
Yeah.
Pass XHTML.
Yeah. So it'll pass HTML validation, but there is also a way that you can declare all your bindings without using attributes. We prefer the attribute method because it's really easy to find everything that's going on. If you just had your HTML completely bare and then it's all incurred, it just gets a lot harder to kind of find where everything is. Whereas for this, we just go, oh, what's happening there? We just go find the HTML attribute and we can see exactly what's happening. So there is ways of doing it. But
I'm thinking more front-end websites, so this is all back-end, so it's probably an issue. But if you were doing like a public sector website and you're using KnockoutJS on your front-end,
yeah,
public-facing site, because they sort of have stringent things to do with validation.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, you can apply it using JavaScript. So there is a way to do it without. We just prefer to do it this way.
Yeah, sure.
Anybody else?
Have you found any helpers that you would recommend for auto-generating your JavaScript view model based on the same view model class you use in the backup?
So are there any helpers that convert a C# model into a JavaScript model to be bindable? Funnily enough, yes. So KnockoutJS actually has how I use. There was a util that I used for kind of helping with the arrays. It's actually got. I mean, if you look on the KnockoutJS website, the documentation is fantastic. I say that I'm just about to not know where that is. Yeah, and I don't.
Trying to bind to JSON.
Oh yeah, loading and saving JSON data, hopefully. So it's got a utility method. Let's have a look. So we just basically use jQuery to handle the posts and the JSON Ajax side of it, and then we've got converting view model to plain JSON. No. So it's got some helper methods to help you convert a view model into just a standard object, which you can then push as JSON. And it also has methods. It's not in that section. If you ask me later, I'll show you a link. But yeah, it has got other utility methods that allow you to parse a model into a bindable model. So you can essentially just chuck an object in C# down as a JSON object, and then you can tell KnockoutJS, convert this into something that's bindable. And it's the mappings. Hooray, mapping plugin. So you can tell it how to map. So essentially, we're doing what all the examples I've just done is the manual mapping. So you define a model, you define all the properties on the object, and you say that they're all observable. But you can also use ko.mapping, and here we've got from JS. So it's taking a JS object and converting it into something bindable. I'm not sure whether you have to configure how it does that, but you can tell it to convert an ordinary object into something that's bindable, and we can get notifications from. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so if you found that kind of useful, KnockoutJS, as I just said there, the KnockoutJS website is fantastic. It's really well documented, and any problem I've ever had, I've been able to find the answer on the KnockoutJS website. It's got some really useful live tutorials, so you can kind of start from the very low level stuff and kind of build and get to grips. So yeah, you should definitely go on there. Forum, they've got a Google group mailing list for KnockoutJS, so any questions go on there. And you can also find out, just dig through some of the examples in V5 code to see how it all works as well, how we've implemented it in V5. And with that, go find your laptops and have a go. So that was it.